Because of the recent attacks upon Jewish people in the United States, I've seen an uptick of rhetoric concerning Judeo-Christian values, Western values, Islamic radical terrorism, etc., etc., etc. And before we go too far, I just want to pull it back and put things in a proper perspective. Now, take a look at this. You remember just 3 months ago in Miami when an Israeli man was driving down the street and he saw two men who he thought was Palestinians, and he decided to just open fire on them simply because he thought they were Palestinian, and he shot them 17 times. But here's the kicker. They weren't even Palestinians. They were Israelis themselves. And then moreover, once the attack happened and the Israelis came under fire, they both survived. They immediately proceed to go onto their social media accounts and start blasting Islam, talking about the dangers of Islam, Islamic terrorism, because they didn't have all the facts themselves. It was 3 Jewish people involved in the incident. One Jewish person looked at these other 2 Jewish people who were actually from Israel, and he just assumed that they were Palestinian, and he opened fire on them for no cause. But they weren't even Palestinian or Muslim. They were actually Israeli Jews from Israel. And then they just jump to an assumption and think that it's an attack on them by a Muslim guy, and they go on social media and start bad mouthing Islam. And it was a Jewish guy who shot him. What about this? This happened about a year ago in Illinois. Do you remember when the older man, he stabbed a child, a 6-year-old boy, to death simply because he was Muslim? Because he perceived him to be Muslim. A grown man stabbed a 6-year-old boy to death simply because he was Muslim. The 6-year-old boy didn't do nothing to nobody, but he was killed for being Muslim in the United States. And then what about this? This happened about a month ago in New York, where an Orthodox Jewish mob attacked and swarmed a woman, and she had to be escorted by police as objects were thrown at her and she was spit on by this Jewish mob simply because they thought that she was a part of the pro-Palestinian protest that was in her neighborhood, in the area. But the thing about it was, she wasn't even a part of the protest. She just happened to live in that area, and she was going to her building, and she get caught up and harassed by this mob who began to spit on her and throw things at her to the point to where she had to be escorted by the police. And did the police do anything to de-escalate the mob? Not at all. So when we talk about this radical Islam and how people like to pretend that Muslims are more violent than any other people, let's just be real. People are violent. Some people happen to be Muslim who are violent. Some people happen to be Jewish who are violent. Some people happen to be Christian who are violent. People are violent. But to try to scapegoat and villainize any one particular group of people, it's not being intellectually honest. It's not being intellectually honest, and it's not being factual. It's being biased and partial to one particular side of the argument. So let's look at both sides before we get to spouting rhetoric against a group of people in its entirety.